He's near me, right?
Who's?
You on East Baltimore?
No, Harvey makes these shirts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, give me a shirt.
Yeah, we got to get you a Read shirt, family. We are live. We're talking about our Read Book Club t-shirts. And so I was just telling my brother Tawolo, that he got to get a shirt. So anyway, you got to get on point, brother. Got to get on point. So family, thank you so much for joining the Read Book Club's discussion on our new book, The Hidden Cost of Being African American: How Wealth Perpetuates Inequality by Thomas Shapiro. I actually interviewed Thomas Shapiro probably about a year ago. And so I do plan on posting that interview. And it will be cool to kind of look at the interview after we go through this. And I would also like to bring him back on the show, because now I've actually read his work. And so I could kind of question him about some things. I wish I would have read the work prior to interviewing him, because his idea of equality is not what my idea of freedom. Like, his idea of freedom and liberty is equality between races. My idea of freedom and liberty is sovereignty for Black people. That's my idea. It's not, trying to integrate fully with American society, or trying to become more white, right? It's not that. My idea of freedom and liberty is sovereignty for, African people. And so I would love to have that discussion with him, because his idea of freedom and liberty is equality between races. So full integration. That is his idea. But nonetheless, tonight, family, we're talking about the preface. I probably butchered that word. I was telling Brother Everett, I like to say preface.
Yeah, that's what I used to say.
I like to say preface, but then look at this. I Googled it, and they preface. They say preface. They say preface, but it just doesn't sound right to me, Brother Tawolo. I like to say preface.
Preface, right?
But they saying preface. So tonight we're going to discuss the preface and the introduction of the book. But before we get started, Brother Everett, please introduce yourself to the listening audience.
How you doing? My name is Everett Winchester from Real Truth and Power Live podcast and game show. I'm blessed to be here for another book.
Beautiful. Brother Tawolo.
Hey, how you doing, family? My name is Brother Tawolo. I'm a lover. I love reading. I love reading this history. I love talking about things in this subject. So I'm looking forward to breaking this book down.
And then welcome back, bro, because you were with us. You were one of the troopers, one of the warriors with us when we read the Blueprint for Black Power, and that wasn't an easy read. We didn't just read it. We analyzed, like, we studied it, we analyzed it. I mean, we really combed through it.
Yeah.
And that's an 868 page text. And to be honest with you, Brother Tawolo, I haven't read a text that thick since. I haven't read.
Need a break.
I needed a break. I needed a break after we read Blueprint for Black Power. And so welcome back, Brother Tawolo. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you. All right. So who wants to spark it off? Brother Everett, Brother Tawolo, with the preface.
I can start off if that's cool.
Okay, good.
Well, one of the things I liked is when the author starts talking about Richard and Carrie Brookins, a Black couple, living a regular life. I believe he said they had the 401 savings, and things went a little sour for them, and they were wondering if they would have to sell their home and things of that nature. He goes into how that would be a little different, their situation, than if they were white. And he was talking a little bit about, I think he wrote a book. I'm not familiar with the book, but Black Wealth and White Wealth. Mm-hmm. He keeps referring back to that book a lot about the inequalities that will happen and the different, choices and expectations that a Black person will have to go through, as opposed to, having it easy as a white person, that white privilege.
Absolutely. Brother Tawolo.
Yeah, most definitely. Thomas Shapiro did a good job in breaking this down. I like the fact that he did tell the tape of two families. When you looking at the Black family and you have the white family, let's look at it in context of an employee. I have a coworker, and that coworker said we make the same amount of money, so we put the same amount of money in our 401k. But one thing that Thomas Shapiro broke down in this book and his other books like Inequality and also Black Wealth, White Wealth, he breaks down the simple fact that they're not the same, because one of the white family may have a benefit of maybe a $20,000 gift from a parent to put a down payment on their house. So even if you may make the same amount of money and you are able to put the same amount in your 401k, one family has contributions that were given to them that is invisible. That's the unlined truth, the one that they don't talk about. So when you break down, and as Brother Everett said, when you break down the Black family, there's a slight difference that's never talked about at the workplace or in the open, the hidden advantage. And this is one thing that I got from the preface.
Absolutely. And just going back to what Brother Everett said about the two families, how he compared Richard and Carrie Brokens to another white family. He was saying how the I think was Richard black. I don't know which family was black. I don't know if it was the Brokens. Yeah, they were black.
Yeah.
And the Brokens were black, and he compared them to another family. And he was saying that the Brokens had wanted to, not the Brokens, but the white family had wanted to, and I might be getting the families mixed up, but I know that he told the tale also in the preface of one family, a white family who wanted to move into the suburbs so that their child would have better schooling. But then the Black family, they also wanted better schooling for their family, but they couldn't afford to move in the suburbs. And that the white family was able to move into the suburbs for better schooling for their children because of the help from their families. And like you said, Brother Tawolo and Brother Everett, it's benefits that we just don't have. We just don't have that leisure. And so that's what I got out of the preface as well. So we can move into the introduction. Who wants to spark off the introduction? And I think I probably jumped ahead when I talked about the Yep. So that wasn't in the preface. That was actually at the beginning of the introduction when he talked about Frank and Suzanne Conway,
right? And
he compared them to where is it? Matt and Logan. Yeah, Matt and Logan. So I actually kind of went into the introduction a little bit already regarding the comparison between the Black family and white family.
Yeah, that's kind of I went to myself. Well, but let me start if I may. The introduction had a lot of stuff packed into it, and I loved it because it talks about that transformative assets. If you look at page 2, family inheritance is more encompassing than money passed at death, because young adults it often includes paying for college, substantial down payment assistance, and buying your first home, and other continuing parental financial assistance. When you sit down to think about it, exactly how one family can get ahead, it's those transformative assets that's passed from one generation to the next. Some things that we can't do, because if you understand that in the 50s, our grandfather couldn't get that house based off the GI Bill. They couldn't get that benefit where the middle class kind of was the biggest boom in United States history. This transformative assets is one of the ways that generational wealth is passed from one generation to the next. And as you see here, a family inheritance, that's the biggest wealth transfer today. And we're living in it right now.
Yeah, and I just want to add to what you said, Brother Tawolo. Thinking back to what our ancestors went through and what they lost. They couldn't transfer the land because of the land grabs. And then, we got scammed with the mortgages. In fact, there's a series on I think it's Netflix or Prime Video called Them. Okay. And so there's a portion in there where like the mortgage company is sitting with another business and they said, well, look, we'll give you the mortgage at 7%. We'll give you the loan at 7%. And they said, well, we could turn around and sell it to these Negroes, at we'll give them the mortgage at 20%, and if they don't pay, then we'll just take the home back. You get what I'm saying?
Home snatch.
Yeah, home snatch. And so they played a lot of games like that with our ancestors. So like you said, Brother Tawolo, we weren't able to get a house grab a house and
Mhm.
actually pass that house down from generation to generation, use that house or borrow against the house to pay for college, to even give our children maybe a thousands of dollars for a business, you
That's
know.
right.
And so we were unable to do that. So I agree 100%. I just wanted to add that he says here, right after the paragraph, a couple of sentences that you read, he says, no matter how much blacks earn, they cannot preserve their occupational status for their children. They cannot out earn the wealth gap. So
That's
a
right.
lot of us think that the way to close the wealth gap is we just got to earn higher. We got to get degrees. We got to get better paying jobs.
Right.
And this is the way that we can close this wealth gap. And so Shapiro is making it clear here. He says you can't preserve your occupational status for your children, and you can't out earn the wealth gap. Hence, one of the needs or the calls for reparations.
Yes.
Right. Right. And as you say as well, it also tells you how that people think that African Americans do not work hard, you know, and that's a myth as well. We don't save as much because we spend all our money. That's a myth. That's also break down a myth as well. We can't save or work hard enough to break this gap, this wealth gap. And he's broke that down too. It's about that transformative assets that's gonna be passed on from generation to next. It's the way that they've been doing it for years, and we have to take advantage of that.
You know, and Dr. Ma, you said something that they piggyback on is when you were talking about buying homes, that home ownership. And he's talking about the discrimination in the markets, the cost of home loans, segregation, the way families accumulate wealth through home appreciation, all of those of which are systematically disadvantages for blacks. So like Brother Tuola was saying, it's we got more than just working hard and making the same pay as you. You know, it's those disadvantages that keep that wealth gap between us separate.
Yeah, redlining was a huge disadvantage.
That's right.
You know, like you said, the redlining, higher mortgage rates. I'm sitting over here thinking of an article that Brother Tuwolo had brought to my attention when we were reading the Blueprint for Black Power. It was an article that said that Black people pay a segregation tax. So whenever we want to live in a neighborhood that is predominantly Black, right? And I mean, in most races like to live around people who look like them, but they say that we pay a segregation tax because our houses are devalued when we do that. So the same house that you might have in a Black neighborhood, if you take that same house and you put it in a white neighborhood, it's worth more money. You know, CNN dropped the article, and then thank you so much, Brother Tuwolo, for bringing that to my attention on the segregation tax. They said that African American people have lost billions of dollars because of the segregation tax.
Yes.
So then at the end of page 3, he says this, brothers. He says, we live in a great paradox. He said, so, you know, we live in this post-civil rights era. People say, you know, it's post-civil rights. All of this legislation has been had. We've had affirmative action. We've had all of these things. He says, but why is racial inequality increasing in this new era? That's the question he posed at the bottom of page 3. And he and the answer to that question is because of the wealth, the perpetuation of the wealth. So that is why racial inequality is steadily increasing because of the perpetuation of wealth. Brother Tuwolo, Brother Everett, did you want to add on or continue?
Before we leave page 3, we got it. We have to make sure we always recognize this. And I'm glad Thomas Shapiro brought this to our attention. He says, the big deal is the last paragraph. These big deals help us understand one of the most important issues facing America as we start the 21st century. You got to look at it like this. It says here that America life over the half of its last century, but since 1954. Now, we got to look at everything that happened prior to 1954. But remember, the civil rights movement has won many battles against racial injustice, and America has reached a broad national consensus in favor of a more tolerant, inclusive society. But I want to erase all that, because you got to remember, we were frozen out of every opportunity since that civil rights. It was given to us. But think about this, and I always bring this to our attention. What happened before 54? we had World War II.
Yes.
World War II was an opportunity for all the soldiers to be part of the American dream. President Obama stood on stage and said how his grandparents benefited in 54, how they benefited from the GI Bill, and how they benefited from also having the FHA, getting their home. And they benefited to make something of themselves. All those soldiers who fought World War II were denied that access on a large scale from the South until they start going north. So around that time frame, we start to see, definitely before then, but definitely start seeing how we was trapped out of the wealth for the next 40 years.
Powerful.
That was powerful. That was powerful. And so he says in the book, I love how he provides us with stats. You know, he says that the average African-American family holds 10 cents of wealth for every dollar that whites possess. He says Black and white professionals in the same occupation earning the same salary typically move through life with significantly unequal housing, residential, and educational prospects, which means that their children are not really on the same playing field. He moves on to tell us, and brothers, I'm looking at page 4. He says that those at the top of the income distribution have increased their share the most. In fact, the slice of the income pie received by the top 1% of families is nearly twice as large as it was 30 years ago, and their share is about as large as the share of the bottom 40%. So the top 1% earns more than the the bottom 40%. So, you know, a lot of us will look at Black folks, and, you know, a couple of them, I think Dr. Oh my goodness, Michelle Alexander, she calls it Black exceptionalism. And they look at Black exceptionalism and they think that all Black people are progressing, but that's not the truth. Right. That's not the truth. And then I love how at the bottom of page 4, he talks about President Bush, right? And how President Bush, you know, how he operated in the best interest of the wealthy class, you know, and that's what he did. And so they mentioned it. Yes, they mentioned it. Go ahead.
39. I was what was it? 39% of the benefits for the wealthiest. 1%. Just crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was bananas what he did. And I mean, and he's going to do what he's going to do because no one cares about the, you know, the poor working class folks. And then on page 5, he presents us with another statistic. He says the average middle income two-parent family now works the equivalent of 16 more weeks than it did in 1979 due to longer hours, second jobs, and working spouses. The years of economic stagnation subsequent to the boom produced a drastic increase in the number of working poor and working homeless families are growing concern. Since late 2001, in a period marked by a declining stock market and rising unemployment, an abundance of data has proved strong evidence that lower income households are under severe economic stress. Personal bankruptcies, automobile repossessions, mortgage foreclosures, and other indicators of bad debt all reached records in 2002.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and this is powerful.
Yeah, and then T, please go into the baby boomers because that's just about. Then he moves into the baby boomers and how they're going to transfer trillions of dollars if, you know, for folks who are tied to baby boomers with wealth. But go ahead and break that down, Brother T.
Well, this is definitely what we have to look at. And as I mentioned before, we have to look at the GI Bill, the FHA loan, because our grandparents, you know, you have to look at our grandparents, our parents. You know, we're around this age of 38 to 45, close to 50. So we're looking at the transfer of wealth is going to be our parents who should have been left inheritance from their parents. And as we know, because of most of the kids have been taken care of by the grandparents who had federal jobs, because they didn't give us many things, but they said at least give them jobs. So the most employed and for the federal government, you gotta look at like the we call the mailman, are blacks. Blacks were given a lot of federal jobs at that point. So that transfer of wealth came from them getting that benefit of working for government jobs and stuff like that. Forbes magazine wrote an article 2 years ago that said that the biggest transfer is happening now, and it's happening from baby boomers, because they were given all the advantage of the 54 Civil Rights Bill. Remember, all the benefits, working, federal loans for homes, also jobs. They didn't give us no land. They didn't give us any other monies, but they made sure they gave us employment. So, these when all the rights came out. So all the finances, all the big money came from that generation. Now think about it now. If our ancestors, which are our past and our grandparents, our mothers, our fathers did not get a benefit of having a home that can pass down to us, money they can pull equity from, any land, that wealth is not coming to the African Americans. Now, remember, in 2053, they said our net worth would be zero. That's 33 years from now, right? Guess what? The biggest transfer of wealth is happening now. So if we're not getting that money, guess who's going to be suffering?
We are.
Brother Tawol and Dr. Mott, I want to piggyback off of that. And I wanted you guys to get into it because I'm sure I can learn probably more than breaking it down. He's talking a lot about the gap between, wealth, and he keeps talking about the wealth inheritance and the rising inequality because of the inheritance of wealth. Is he talking about land and, is that what he's going into? Or is he talking about something different? Like, for example, I like you were saying, Brother Swola, how purchasing a house can be passed down and things of that nature. Is that what he's talking about more so?
He's talking about land. He's talking about insurance policies. We're talking about homes. He's talking about any asset that was built by the boomers based off of the transformative assets that they received from their parents and also received from their good paying jobs, the bonuses, the opportunity to make their balance sheet in the black and ours in the red.
Right.
So they had opportunity to have that passed on from their generation.
Right.
So it just kept on going from one generation to the next. So Thomas Shapiro is talking about all those transformative assets that we didn't have benefit from. Not all blacks. You have some people, blacks who have gained homes, land, but we're looking at the 13 million that has been locked out. So this is what he's talking about when you talk about the transformative generation that's going to get the inheritance.
And I'm glad you said that because it's also the lack of education that we have as Black people, not that we lack that education to, like you mentioned, insurance, life insurance. Life insurance is a transformation of wealth.
Yes.
A lot of people don't even I don't want to get life insurance. I don't want to get life insurance so much, things of that nature, that education part.
They look at it in two ways. These whites who are transferring this generational wealth, we look at life insurance as just, okay, we're going to get this benefit when we die.
Right.
They get a certain assurance that they can benefit while they're living. And when their child, once they set these policies up, when they become 65, guess what? This policy pays their child maybe $1,200 to $3,000 per month because it's gained interest.
Yes.
See, we don't understand that because we don't understand the financial aspect of how to build those assets. And that's the education that we need in order to take us to the next step.
Yeah, awesome.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And so on page 6 and 7, he's moving into, he says, the context of racial inequality. And he begins that particular section with talking about W.E.B. Du Bois and Myrdal. And he says that they describe the American dilemma, right? And Brother T, he says he talks about the American dilemma. He says this influential and lengthy study documented the living conditions for African Americans during the first half of the century, revealing to many for the first time the impact of systematic discrimination in the United States. He also talks about how W.E.B. Du Bois at the beginning of the 21st century he declared that the problem of the century was the problem of the color line. But he did say during, in the middle of the century that W.E.B. Du Bois said that we did, progress, I guess, or made strides in education and civil rights and voting rights, occupation, income, housing, literature. He says in arts and science. But he said it happened, but it was all unequal, incomplete, and accompanied by wide gaps of temporary retreats. So it's like, okay, you're making these strides, right? But it's not equal when you're comparing yourself, I guess, to your counterpart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're making these strides, but again, it's unequal, it's incomplete, and he said it's also accompanied by wide gaps. So while we're making these strides, they're making strides too, and so you're still dealing with the widening of the gaps. And so he talked about that, and so Thomas Shapiro concludes page 6 with saying that if we want to make real progress towards racial equality and democracy, then we have to understand the racial wealth gap, and we have to not only understand it but close it. But brothers, this is what I would like to ask you. And I'm looking. I have notes jotted down on page 7. He was talking about progress, and he kept saying, progress is real. He said, it's real. It happened. African Americans have made strides. And so to me, and this is the conversation I'm going to bring him on to have with him, because it seems like he's measuring progress based on, again, equality between the races, how us becoming, as Yvette Carnell would say, more white, more integrated into white society, more equal with the dominant society. That is not my definition of progress. Right. So I felt really conflicted reading the introduction, because my idea of us progressing is moving towards sovereignty, moving towards independence, moving towards self-help and self-reliance, being able to control our destiny. So in essence, to me, progress will be moving in the direction of obtaining power, not how well I'm living in their society or integrated in something that they've built, and when I say built, I'm talking about their system. That's what I mean. So I was a little bit conflicted with that. But what are your thoughts on that when you read page 7 and he made the claim that African Americans have progressed and how he's measuring progress? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know what? I'm glad you mentioned the introduction, because I was thinking of that too. It kind of made it to where he was talking about, a job and the 401k and stuff like that, when he was comparing the families, as if that was that's how he was measuring his success, to get a government job per se, or to get a job like that. But like you're saying, you're looking at it in terms of what we need to do to empower ourselves. Whereas our teachers teaching our kids, our culture, our history, growing up and building up our community. And I'm interested to know just if he goes into the book of saying this is when we can get our ultimate power. When you're reading from his standpoint, it's still early in the book, so I don't know. But I'm really interested to see if he goes into that a little bit.
Okay. When it comes down to this page 7, he talks about race neutrality. And this is one of the focus that America believed that they could, achieve after the post-racial conflict that we've been through. If you look at the first paragraph, race neutrality is what America wanted us to push for. But we have to look at this, that America is based off policies, and most of the policies was restrictive. So the white society believes that we are having a heads up, or we're moving in the right direction when those restrictive policies are released. The right to marry who we want, the right to own land, the right for employment, to move any restrictive laws that we may have experienced. If that's removed, they believe that's a win-win. And as Dr. Ma'at was saying, is that she don't look at that as being a win-win. Sovereignty is a win-win.
Right.
And I don't think that in this page, up to this point of the introduction, he's talking about that. He's basically talking about any restrictive policies being removed, which allows us a part of the American fabric.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to know, know your thoughts on that. And so then he moves into on page 8, he's talking about the traditional measures of economic well-being and inequality. He said typically they look at income, education, and jobs. And he says, and when you look at that, it does show authentic and impressive progress towards racial inequality from the mid 60s through the early 1980s. And then he said it's been stagnant ever since. But so those are the traditional measures. But his measure in this particular book, he's coming from a asset perspective, and then he moves into the world of aspects on page 9, and he talks about this story. Can one of you brothers break down the story at the beginning of the section? The grumble happens at Jack Grumman, and what happened with Jack Grumman, or do you want me to talk about it?
Oh, the sicko group.
Yes.
Was it the sicko group one?
The city group. Yep, the city group. So do you want me to talk about it, or brother?
Yeah, you can talk. Y'all might break it down better than me.
Oh, no. It was just a quick story that he talked about because he's just showing how whites benefit from having assets.
Right.
So
I think when he was talking about he had pledged like $1 million or something.
Yeah, so it was a guy that named Jack Grumman who worked as a security analyst for the Citigroup Corporation.
Right.
And they, Citigroup had some sort of, they wanted to work with AT&T. And what he did was a little finagling of the stock rating of AT&T. And as a result of that, so first of all, he was a CEO. He was a security analyst. So that's one thing. So he had a high position in this corporation, and the CEO in the corporation wanted to, it said they had lowered the Citigroup stock. Or maybe I'm getting it mixed up. Let me look at it again. So it says, Jack Grumman's tale is the perfect example. Grumman, a security analyst, yes, for the Citigroup Corporation, lowered Citigroup's stock rating for AT&T. And Citigroup's CEO wanted further business dealings with AT&T. And since they knew that AT&T was very sensitive about its stock rating, the CEO suggested that Mr. Grumman take a fresh look. And it says, upon urging of his boss, Mr. Grumman's new evaluation restored AT&T to its previous rosy status. And then two Fortune 500 corporations did more business together. But as a result of that, the Citigroup pledged $1 million, right? To a nursery in Manhattan. They secured admission for Grumman's twin daughters to get into a program that had previously turned them down. So you see how he used his assets, or they used their assets to get $1 million to get admission into a place that turned them down. And so Shapiro in this particular section is talking about how whites use their assets to get advantages, and how we don't have any assets. Most of us don't. And so we're at a disadvantage. And so he was using that tale to teach us that. And I have a personal story I wanted to add. I know the owner of Collins Seafood. His name is Dante. He used to have a location over here in Randallstown. And then he's now, I think, over in East Baltimore, West Baltimore. But when I asked him, how did he get started? He said that he went to, I think it was Harbor Bank, the black owned bank in Baltimore. They turned him down. He went to Bank of America, and I think he wanted $1 million loan from them. And so he ended up selling a restaurant that he had downtown at one point. He sold that restaurant. So he had some cash, a couple $100,000 in cash, but his mother had an asset. Her house was paid off. So his mom put up her house to back the loan. And so he was able to get the loan, and he opened up Collins right there in Randallstown. And now he has another location. I think they just closed that location, and he moved over East or West Baltimore. But the point that I'm trying to make is that he had an asset in his family that he was able to utilize to seize a business opportunity, to get a loan for a business. And a lot of us don't have that. A lot of us can't go to our moms and dads and say, hey, you got a paid off house. I'm trying to get this loan.
I wonder how old his mom was.
I don't know. Dante is like a little older than me.
I think she was a boomer, right?
Yeah, yep, she's a boomer.
She a boomer?
She a boomer. She a boomer, T. I see what you're saying, T. She's a boomer. So like you said, so that
it sounds like Damien Johns, right?
Yes, sound like Damian Johns.
Okay,
And tell the people that story. I think that's a beautiful story on assets as well.
Damian Johns, was one of the creators and founders of FUBU, For Us By Us, the clothing line that sparked hip hop fashion. Basically, one of the companies. One of the things that me and Dr. Ma'at talked about some years ago was that he was sharing a story on Black media about how he started from his trunk and how he flipped one hat and made it two hats and then took the two hats to make it four hats. But the transformative asset story he failed to talk about when his mom put up her house.
Wow, I never knew that.
As collateral for him to make those orders when he got the big deal. It's one of the, like I said, it's one of the things that is never told is that how our parents, how our boomers help benefit us to make those big strides, and why it's so important to have transformative assets to make those things happen. So this is one of the stories. And if we can go back to page 6 for 1 second and jump to page 7, one of the things that the author talked about is how the benefit of the asset and how it benefit his children getting to school. And we talked about that that's an invisible benefit, right? Think about what happened in USC. How the rich use their benefit and their money to get their children
into the top schools.
Top schools.
Yeah.
Only for social standing. These kids were going to be fine if they went to school or not, but they went to school because that's a social standing.
The connections, right? Everything, yeah.
But the connections. So they paid top dollar, use their influence in order to take the seat of minorities, which could have benefited from that position. So these are ways that, that we are left out as well. We're left out when we don't have those assets, not just in housing, just not in our bank account, but in their job.
That's a fact.
I got the most I got out of the preface. I think we said that right, preface. Yes. And the introduction is what you guys are mostly saying, Brother Twola, is that having a house and having assets and passing it down to the next generation. I think that's going to be a critical key that a lot of our people don't even think about when we start talking about generational wealth and providing for your kids when you go away, living for the future, not living now and saving. So I hope to pick up a little bit of that on both sides of how they portray us doing it and how they doing it. Maybe it's something in there that in the middle that we can grasp.
Yeah, but I agree 100% with you, and that's something that we need to think about when we're out here procreating. And
yeah,
I would say something, but I'm not gonna rehash an argument that I had with a friend of mine. But when we're out here procreating, that's what we need to be thinking about. You're bringing people, a human being into this world. What assets do you have for that person?
That's right.
What assets have you built to pass down? We can't just be out here procreating for procreating's sake. We got to be procreating with a purpose, and that purpose should be passing down something, passing down our legacy, passing down assets to our children. And Brother Twola, you mentioned, throughout the conversation, you said transformative assets. And so I would like to just define for the people what transformative assets is. I'm looking at the bottom of page 10. He says that transformative, or the author Shapiro says that transformative assets are, it says, inherited wealth, lifting a family beyond their own achievements. So let's say, okay, Dr. Ma'at, she graduated from Morgan. She has a doctorate in engineering. Transformative wealth would have been if I would have been sitting on 2 houses that my great-great-grandmother. So in addition to me achieving that and taking my salary and doing what I want to do myself, but now I also have maybe 2 or 3 houses that I inherited from grandparents, or a policy that my grandmother left me, or the policy my mom left me. So these are, again, inherited wealth that's going to lift you or family beyond your own achievements. And so I just wanted to make sure that we gave them a working definition, brother Twola.
I'm so happy that you read that, because we have to dispel the myth of self-made.
Yes.
We have to dispel that myth of self-made. That only takes you to a certain level. As you said here, transformative assets take you beyond what you can do for yourself.
That's right.
Because think about this. I'm just going to make this one point, then we can move on. Life insurance, whole life insurance. If it's the right whole life insurance plan, it would take care of a person at death. If the person lives through a certain whole life insurance plan that certain wealthy people put into place, it takes care of the child when they get into their retirement age before death. That means Dr. Mayat made a great point. We don't think about the end in mind when we having children. So if this policy is built in the first 20 years, right, it's $1 million policy, whole life of policy. In 20 years, that child gets that policy. They pull money from the cash value. And then after that, they get money up until their retirement, past their retirement. That's somebody who thought about their children's end and not just the beginning.
That's right. That's right.
We don't have the ability to think long term for our children. So we should not have them.
Come on. If you can't, right.
He got me want to look at my insurance policy. He's flowing. I'm like sitting up here like, man.
And so he moves into a conversation or a discussion on class and racial identity. And he says that a family's assets consisting of financial resources like savings accounts, stocks, bonds, home equity and other investments are not merely means through which they measure success or make a life. These assets also define a family's community and class status and racial identity. He says our conversations with families will illustrate how they use assets to establish class, community, and race boundaries. And so then he goes into this discussion of how with Hispanics, he talks about immigrants. He says immigrants, Asians, Hispanics, and others form racial identities in large measure by the characteristics of the communities they live in. He says, for example, Hispanics who live in predominantly upper middle class white communities and whose children attend white schools are far more likely to be treated as and identify as white than those living in poor non-white communities. In contrast, African Americans can use assets to achieve class status, but where they live has little consequence for their racial identities. Widespread residential segregation further restricts African American families from using assets to break out of racial boundaries. So no matter where we go, Brother T, we're black. That's what he's saying. And he's saying we can't use our assets the way these others. So they use their assets. They move into these communities.
That's right.
And so then they can identify with white. They go to, and they'll be treated like whites. But he's saying with us, we can use, our assets. He says, he says we can use our assets to achieve class status. But he says, but where we live has little consequence for our racial identity. So wherever you go, you're going to be looked at as black. Wherever you move.
Then he's above on chapter page 11. I'm sorry. He says, while it's no longer legal to deny access to housing based on race, there's no law against keeping our people who cannot afford the mortgage and thus hoarding community and educational opportunities. So just think about this. I can no longer say that you can't live here because you're black. But I can keep you from affording it with no assets, no money, no down payment. You're not moving into that house. What was one of the first things that President Trump did when he got into office? He restricted the FHA. You had to come up with that $25,000, $30,000 or that 20% in order to move into that house. When you have the power to restrict, who has that $30,000, $40,000 and move into that $250,000 or $300,000 home that may put them in a better zip code and may put their children in a better position because of better schooling and better opportunities because of resources? If you don't have that money saved up, you stay put.
Yep.
In a community that may have less.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Those restrictive policies, is one way that they kept this out. And when they found out they couldn't do it based off of race, they say, you know what, we'll just make it hard for them to get it. You know? Hey, I'm sorry. You got 4 kids, $150,000 house. Three of them kids ain't going to college. How much money can you pull from $150,000 home? Right. When college away is about $25,000 to $30,000 a year. So other things must be set up, and that's why he says that those assets build a certain community based off of racial profile.
Yeah.
Because like you said, they have the assets, so they can create the communities. They can, and you can't move in it. You don't have the assets. You're not making the money. So then, like you said, now these racial boundaries are created. And so he said, even though we live in this post-civil rights era, we're still segregated, heavily segregated. And especially in Maryland. I remember when my cousins came out to visit me from California, they looked around. This may have been in the early 2000s. And they said, I can't believe, like literally it was an all black neighborhood. And they was looking around like, I can't believe how segregated you are out here. And I said, well, Maryland has its parts. Like if you go to Columbia, it's more diverse there. But, in Baltimore City, East, West, Randallstown, Woodlawn, these are predominantly black areas, and so they were just very stunned at how segregated we are in Maryland. And so,
wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to move into another section because I know that time is of the essence. I love how he talks about how, freedom and liberty come with having assets. He was saying that there's certain freedoms and it's certain freedoms that people who have assets enjoy versus people who don't have the assets enjoy. So he was saying it comes with a certain level of freedom. So some people, like the couple that he mentioned in the beginning of the introduction, that white couple said, well, I'm going to move to the suburbs. And they had the means of moving to the suburbs so that their children could attend a better educational institution. Whereas the other black family who didn't have assets, they couldn't do that. So when you have assets, it comes with a sort of freedom and liberty that you have versus not having those assets. Did you all want to jump in?
Dr. Mott, I also think he said, even if we did have the assets, I think he was summing it up that, black Americans, he put it in the terms of we pay a very steep tax for the uneven playing field. I think Brother Tawola I think he was saying something like that, where it's a little, our loan, our interest rates and everything are a little bit higher than if we were white Americans. So even if we do have those assets, the tax that we're paying because of the uneven wealth gap and the playing field isn't level is a little different as well. It's another disadvantage. I just wanted to put that in there because they were flowing on that on page 13 a lot.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I love how he talks about the paradox. He says, I spoke to many families, for example, who see no paradox in using inherited wealth to leverage advantages and opportunities unavailable to others. So you got white folks, when we talk about white privilege, they some of them don't know that they're privileged. They think that it was their hard work that got them where they are. And they're just using the fruits of their hard work to get where they want to get to or where they want to be. And what Shapiro is saying here, he said they actually see no paradox in the way that they use their inheritance. They think it says they insisted upon how hard they work and how much they deserve. Their station in life seems to trump any recognition that unearned successes and benefits come at the price for others. So I just put shaking my head in the column. Yeah. When I just put shaking my head in the column. Peace to you, Sun Lion 55. I love you too, King. He said, I love you, Dr. Mott, even on your vacation.
As they say, it's the unseen advantage. And they look at it, say, we worked hard. This is what we got. They forget about that the nice gift the parents gave, the $20,000 gift the parents gave to help buy their first home, help pay for their wedding, help, put that trust fund together for their children. So these are things they don't have to worry about. That plus job that gave them a bonus. They
That's
forget about
Trump
these
going, right?
benefits. Yeah, $1 million, right?
No.
Trump got like $1 million.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought it was more than a mill. I thought it was like 100 mil or something from his grandfather. I think it was more than a mill.
Well, I know his
no,
father gave him a mill, but maybe I don't know. I mean,
oh, his father gave him a mill.
Know.
I thought he got more than that.
Let's look at the unfair advantages. There's so many unfair advantages. We look at brother Obama. Obama got over $500,000 from his grandmother. You know, we don't talk about that, but he also talked about the benefits that they received from the GI Bill FHA loan because they was in the war and the grandmother was working on a production line for the airplanes and things. So all these little benefits came from all the free stuff the government gave, but the government also restrict a few. I challenge anyone to go study that, who's restricted and how many blacks benefited when that bill came out, because these are the things that's always happened to our community. They always found a way to lock us out, and the privilege comes from them just always receiving it. It's something normal. Don't every mother and father give $25,000 as a gift to help me get my first house? Don't every grandparent do a trust fund for the grandkids?
Right.
I'm just thinking it's something that always should happen, right?
Right.
We gotta start educating ourselves in our community on this kind of thinking. You know what I mean? That's very important. That we don't think like that at all. And Dr. Ma, I'm glad you said it. You know how they classify success, working hard for us. You know what I mean? Getting that the federal job or what have you. But we're not taking the benefits of even starting a business on the side, even if you have a government job, using all of these little tricks that they use to get pass things down to get assets. A business is an asset. You know what I'm saying? It's just like a home and the benefits you get tax break wise and things of that nature. Things that you can pass down to you. You know, it's making me think even more that I got to do more now, just thinking about it. But just the lack of education, like you say, it's normal for them. And for us, we always thinking like that they shouldn't be doing it because we're working so hard. We're the
only group that's supposed to make something happen with the $500 we got left over in a month.
Right. Exactly. No, that's a fact. That's a fact. And I just want to plug brother Ursa Ma'at Ra Tefnut. He said he got 400 mil. I knew it was more than that. Trump had more than that.
Yeah.
I knew it was more than that. Yeah. He said he probably looked it up. Yeah. But I want to end with this. I'm looking at page 14 and 15, and then he gets into his methodology and him talking to different families. But it says that he says real estate and mortgage markets and educational environments contribute significantly to the racial wealth gap by structuring racially different opportunities in home ownership, wealth created by home ownership, and education quality. The point I wish to emphasize here is that in the current structure, there is a huge hidden cost of being African American, just as current policies and structures reward the individual actions of many white families. So he just, this is the book, family. Make sure you get it. The hidden cost of being an African American, how wealth perpetuates inequality. He ends the introduction with talking about his methodology, breaking that down to us, telling us how he interviewed about 182, so nearly 200 families from what did he say? Some from St. Louis, Los Angeles, and Boston. So he interviewed nearly 200 families. He said they formulated different questions. They used national surveys to derive at the conclusions that he made in the book. And so what I love about this part, Brother Tiwolo, is that he didn't just write a book and just, and with a bunch of ideas. Yeah, I mean, I know these are his ideas, but he laid out his methodology. And I'm a person that loves to understand the methodology. It's great that you wrote a book, but what went into it? And so I love how in the last couple of pages, he laid out what he did, his interviews, the amount of data they collected. He said he said interviews took almost 2 hours each and resulted in about 400 hours of audio tapes to listen to and 7,000 pages of transcribed data to read and analyze. He said they also looked at, he says, the second source of material supporting this book thus draws on national data sources, especially 2 surveys of households across the nation that ask systematic questions about family assets and liabilities. So he didn't just write the book out of the thin air. You know,
Right.
he had a sound methodology to this. He had a very, very sound methodology to this. And at the end, when he talked about policies, because he was saying that, you know, we need to close the racial wealth gap by instituting what he called asset-based public policy. When I read that, Brother T. Wolo, I thought about Dr. Jared Ball, because, you know, when Dr. Jared Ball wrote that book, The Myth of Black Buying Power, what's it called? The Myth of Black Buying Power, or the Myth of,
playing a black power.
Yeah, when he wrote that, he argued that we need to be changing policies. And so remember, everyone, you know, for years, a lot of us, you know, oh, we just need to buy black. So we thought that buying black would get us out of this problem, right? Buy black, and we do need to buy black. And I don't want anybody to misconstrue my words, because then somebody will take a snippet of what I'm saying, Brother T. Wolo, and say, Dr. You know, Dr. Mize said, you know, no, but Dr. Jared Ball was saying we need to be going at the policies. It needs to be some policies that are created that will enrich, or that will put wealth in the hands of Black people. That's right. And so he caught a lot of flack. But when I read Shapiro saying, look, you know, we need to create asset-based policy. Yeah. I said, okay, so he's talking Dr. Jared Ball's language.
Yeah. Because the policies are the things that restrict or allow. And if we don't look at it like that, then we're behind the 8 ball. We got to look at what allows, and we fight to make sure that those things are enforced.
Absolutely.
You know, the policy is the things that kept us working and not building the assets needed in order to make that transformative asset possible to give to our generation. These are the things that we have to, you know, we have to look at about what's more important and what can build us to that next level. So policies we must look at.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I can agree with you more. And then Dr. Amos Wilson said that in the Blueprint for Black Power. Remember, Brother T. Wolo, I think it was on page 34, there was a chart that talked about how from 1675 all the way to 1975, policies were created that enriched white folks.
That's right.
They did it through policies. So a lot of folks came at Dr. Jared Ball's neck for saying that we need to go after, you know, the policies. We need to get into politics, right. But we do. And even Dr. Anderson said that in his book Powernomics. He talked about practicing group economics, but he also talked about practicing group politics.
That's right.
You know. All right, brothers. Do you have any closing words?
No, I just can't wait to get into chapter 1. It's going to be very interesting. I know I'm gonna learn a lot.
Yeah, I think the same here. Just Dr. Mayat.
Well, you know, Brother Tawolo, you already read the book.
Oh yeah.
You wasn't supposed to say that.
This is your second time reading it. You was like, oh, you reading it? Yeah, I'm gonna read it. You know, I'm trying to catch up with you, bro. I'm trying to catch up with my big brother. And trying to catch up with him. But so we got an expert on the panel. But I'm gonna be going live tomorrow. And I just wanted to let the family know I'll be going live tomorrow to talk about Howard University. And you already know, T, my son goes to Howard, but I yes. sent him when I saw the article that Felicia Rashard was being attacked literally by Howard University students and Howard University alumni. I texted him and I said, Howard, you all have lost your minds. And so I'm going to have a conversation tomorrow live about that. So if you brothers want to join me, feel free to join me. I'll send you brothers a text and let you know when I'm going live. But I'm going to be talking about, what happened with Felicia Rashard. I'm also going to go live and talk about what's happening with, I think you pronounce her name, Sha'Carri Richardson, the young lady that was disqualified because they found Olympics.
She's able to run now, though, right?
I think she's running now, but the people people dragged her, Brother Everett. Yeah. And did she make a mistake? Yes. Did she make a poor decision? Yes. But who the hell hasn't? And I mean, Lord, I mean, if the Most High or whatever you want to call a deity, if my life flashed before you all, your jaw would drop. I made a lot of decisions in my life, you know.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
I did, I did. I mean, I hustled, I sold weed. I mean, I did all kinds of stuff. So what if the world saw everything that I did, everything that you did, you know? And so the way that they dragged that young lady at 21, she's 21, and they dragged the baby. She's just a baby. She's a baby. She made a bad decision. She suffered the consequence from her decision. Let it go. Let it go. And so I'm going to go live to talk about, Felicia Rashad, and I'm going to go live to talk about what happened with the track star, Sha'Carri Richardson. Okay. And so both of those ladies have my full support. And I said that on Instagram. I don't know if you all follow me on Instagram, but I said both of those queens had my full support. I don't think Felicia Rashad did anything wrong by saying that she was happy that a miscarriage of justice had been corrected. I mean,
it wasn't consistent. She's been consistent on her stance. Yeah. So now why blast her? She's been consistent.
They're blasting her. Oh, she's against the sexual. I said, these people have lost their minds. But see, that's what happens when you brainwash a society and when people don't have critical thinking skills. You just kind of go along with the bandwagon and whatever the media is saying. And so tomorrow's discussion is for folks who have critical thinking skills.
I like one thing that Stephanie Mills said. She says if you had a problem with him, give him all that money back that he gave you on over.
Oh yeah, she did say that.
Yeah. Yes, give him back the daggone money since y'all got a problem, because he gave a lot to Howard University.
Yes, he did.
He gave a whole lot to Howard, and they just, how our people sometimes, boy, when the white folks throw you away, our people will throw you away too. But anyway, so I'm going to go live tomorrow to talk about that. I'm also going to go live to talk about the 4th of July. And I'm going to break out Dr. Ishanka Musa Barashango's work, because you got some Black folks. They were just celebrating Juneteenth, a week and a half ago. And now they running out here with the red, white, and blue and putting out fireworks and in the parade right now. So we got to have a conversation about that. So I'm going to go live. And like I said, brothers, I'll send you a link. And, if you can join me, okay?
All right.
All right, family, join us back here, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Sunday. We're going to discuss Chapter 1 of The Hidden Cost of Being an African American, How Wealth Perpetuates Inequality. Hold it up, T. Hold it up so we can get a nice little picture, screenshot of this. So, family, join us back here, same time, same place. Peace and Black power.